The Arms Dealer, Chapter 4, First Part. "Wait a sec, you bastard," Pick said. He and her you trying frantically to keep a pace, and when the narrow path took a turn to the right they finally caught up. The other two horses had halted, and Dee and Annette stared ahead without saying a word. It was strange the way they didn't move a muscle. "What is it?" the boy asked. But even before he'd finished the question, a heavy odor prickled his nose. The wind had changed direction. The stench carried on the breeze blowing their way now made Pick cough. And even a grown man like her you held his nose. That Annette sat there without doing anything seemed most unusual. What the hell? This smell. It's blood," Pick said, advancing on his horse to Annette's side, and that was when he finally looked ahead. What? Was all he could say as he, like the other two, froze. Behind him, her you said in his stead, "What the hell is this?" And then he too stopped moving. Up ahead there spread a vast square. The square was stained with red. So great was the quantity of blood that Pick got the feeling it had even tinged the very air with vermilion. The cause was obvious. Monsters and supernatural beasts beyond numbering. Covered the cobblestoned expanse of ground. All of them were dead or dying, and though the chests or flanks of some of them still rose and fell, the breathing was so weak, it would clearly soon be at an end, and such individuals were extremely few and far between. Blood still ran from bodies of every conceivable hue, and it wasn't always red. Apparently they were also of varying natures, with white, black, or even purple smoke rising here and there, and on closer examination, those bodies or exoskeletons were so dissolved by their powerfully acidic blood that almost no semblance of their former shape remained. As the wind picked up, it carried the stench, leaving both Pick and her you covering their mouths. And while Dee was another matter altogether, it was strange how Annette, just a regular person like them, kept holding her reins the same as always. The supernatural creatures were facing their way, almost in a straight row, but closer to the center of the square, more and more of them were facing the opposite direction. At first they all attacked en masse, and then later they tried to run, her you murmured, in a deeply impressed tone. A horrified look on his face, Pick said, "Tried to run. Why?" The better question is, from what? From what, then? Whatever was in the middle of the square. Huh? At the very moment Pick furrowed his brow, from somewhere in the center of the square, hidden by the mound of corpses, a yellowish light began to rise magnificently, trailing white smoke behind it. After rising roughly 50 yards it lost speed and, leaving a graceful arc in its wake, began to fall. "It'll be close," Pick squeaked. "Real close," her you attested. Suddenly, Pick noticed something. Son of a... The point of impact is right here. Tapping Annette on the shoulder, he shouted, "Run for it." However, and the boy didn't try to escape, for Annette had slumped casually to one side. "Did you just go and faint?" Pick said in disbelief, leaning over in his saddle to grab Annette by the collar and pull her upright again. "Hey? Snap out of it," he said, shaking her by the shoulder, and the girl opened her eyes. "It hurts. What's wrong?" "The sky's falling. Get going." Not even leaving Annette a second to be surprised, he gave a kick to the rump of her horse and sent it after Dee, following along after at a gallop. "Are we going to make it?" He thought they were too late in getting their start. The wind whistled overhead. It told them it had fallen right behind them. Pick closed his eyes, and the sound of an explosion shook his eardrums. It was less spectacular than he'd expected. Huh. There was no rocking of the earth, no heaven-shaking boom. The explosion continued. Bang, 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 bang. Looking back, the boy saw a prismatic light bouncing around on the ground. Halting his steed, Pick wheeled around. "What the hell? Firecrackers?" he groaned. Dee was beside him. Did this big jerk know that's what it was? If he did, who threw the firecrackers? "Hello there." A wrinkly voice called out from the center of the corpse-littered square. It was that of a woman. Pick and Soryu's eyes went wide. "Came after all, Dee. I've been waiting." Dee said nothing in response to her friendly greeting. His dark eyes still reflected the countless dead. Turning toward Pick, the hunter said, "Our employer's racing off at breakneck speed. Better bring her back and fast." "Well, I don't take orders from you," the boy grumbled, yet undoubtedly her safety was of paramount concern to him. However, before Pick could comply with Dee's directive, Annette seemed to have gotten the situation in hand, riding her cyborg horse back with trepidation. What halted her was the sharp rasp of a discharge. The wall of corpses was probably the only thing that had kept it from spraying them. From the other side of the wall, a little old woman in a green and brown camouflage outfit was rising straight in the air. The silver box in her back must have had an exhaust nozzle somewhere to the rear, where the group couldn't see. Beneath her, the air churned and eddied. "What the hell is this old lady?" Pick bared his teeth. The old woman also showed her teeth as she grabbed a lever projecting out in front of her from the box. "Is she coming at us?" Though Pick drew his firearm, the old woman still grinned as she started to climb, swiftly reaching an altitude of over 100 yards, where she looked down at the people on the ground as if she were a glaring deity. "What the?" A tinge of turbulence shook her deeply wrinkled face. The hand grasping the lever moved feverishly. "What's the problem with Grandma? Can't she get back down?" Dee raised his left hand. "Push the left lever forward," a hoarse voice called out, "and then a quick shove to the right. Make it snappy." It was a few seconds later that the old woman began a slow descent, until she vanished behind the pile of corpses. Her face was etched with a glum expression. To the rear of the mountain of corpses a fairly wide path had been left, possibly as a means of escape. As for why, it was so wide. In the center of a 30-foot clearing was parked a metallic wagon. It wasn't horse-drawn. There was a cylinder as long as two horses hitched end to the end, that had wheels attached to it, while the top, what would have been the horses' backs, had white vapor rising from it. The holes in its top were arranged in 2 rows of 6 each, which discharged surplus steam generated within the cylinder. This was something many a frontier farmer coveted, a steam-driven wagon. As the vehicle to the rear was a covered wagon, and they couldn't see inside. But from the size of it, it seemed it could haul quite a bit of cargo, and still have room to bed down inside it. Having set down the jetpack she'd had on her back, the old woman flexed her shoulders and looked up at the 4 riders. "Welcome," she said, holding the hem of her long, flowery skirt as she curtsied. "Why the big show and dance?" Annette asked Dee in a hushed tone. "That's how she greets customers." "Customers?" "That's right, and a good one at that, isn't that right, Dee?" As she looked at him, her face, covered with wrinkles and age spots, melted with rapture. "And what business have you today? Why, call Granny Gerhardt all the way out to this dangerous place. If you're looking for something cheap, you'll feel my wrath." At her feet fell a single glittering disc. It made a hard metallic ching. Generous as always, I see." Embracing one hand in the small of her back, Granny Gerhardt made a great production of picking up the gold coin. After a glance at it, she grinned and said, $1,000 aristocrat coin. What were you planning on doing? Starting a war or something?" Hers was a daring smile. Dee said, "First, I'd like you to implant a tracking chip in the girl." "Shouldn't be a problem. The rest we'll discuss in private." Dee got off his horse. He must have had plans he wasn't going to share with the rest of his traveling companions. "Damn, that's cold of him," Pick spat venomously. Her Yu clapped him on the shoulder. "We should dismount too. My ass is killing me." As soon as he was down off the horse, Pick asked the old woman headed to the covered wagon with Dee, "Say, Granny, did you take down all these monsters?" "Must have been pretty hungry, eh?" she replied. "Came at me from all sides just to eat an old woman who's nothing but skin and bones. Only they bit off more than they could chew. How'd you swing it?" The boy inquired, his voice trembling with anticipation. The old woman said nothing, but pointed down at the boy's feet. A weapon that looked to be an old-fashioned firearm had been unceremoniously dumped there. A tin box sat to its right, and a belt of ammunition was feeding into the top of the weapon. Pick's eyes went wide at the unusually large barrel of the gun. "The safety's on. Have a look at it if you like," she told him magnanimously. And then the old woman ducked behind the covered wagon. "Page break. An odd little group you've got there." "Hired on as a bodyguard," said the hoarse voice. Plainly knitting her brow, the old woman remarked, "Still got that thing stuck on you? Just go ahead and lop it off and throw it in the volcano up on Mount Ring, why don't you?" She spat. "One of these days," Dee replied, seeming a bit amused. "Huh." The left-hand groaned, perhaps having decided that the hunter wasn't necessarily joking. First part, end.